Hey guys, hey, this is Mr. Culhane, and we are going to be discussing today the origins and the causes of World War I, which is also known as the Great War. Now, in your notes, you should already have read a little bit about these causes, but I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail. So, the four causes are pretty easy to remember. These are the long-term causes, and they actually spell out the word main. So at the top left you can see that there are the four causes: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And going from top to bottom, they spell out the word main. So it's a nice little easy device that you can use to help remember what the four causes are. Now what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through the four causes one by one, explaining how they helped lead to World War I beginning. Now I'm actually going to go in reverse order, so I'm going to be starting with nationalism. And the region we're going to be focusing on is called the Balkans, which I think we'll be zooming in on right now. So this region, which is directly east of Italy, was originally part of the Ottoman Empire before World War I began. And the Ottoman Empire, as we know, is becoming weaker and weaker. And as we also have studied, the Ottoman Empire really doesn't have a strong sense of nationalism within their empire. They're divided up into those separate millets. Now, as the empire becomes weaker and weaker, these nationalist groups, these separate millets, start declaring their independence from the empire. Now the Balkans, these groups of people are much more closer in culture and language to the Russians to the northeast than they are to either the Austrians or to the Turks. So as they're declaring independence from the Ottoman Empire, they're looking to Russia as their savior or as their protector. At the same time, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is the big chunk north of the Balkans, the big piece of land there, they're undergoing some changes due to nationalism as well. They actually have to split their empire into two separate monarchies. So originally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was ruled by one person, and that person was almost always an Austrian. He came from their elite aristocratic group. Now after they split into the dual monarchy, there are two rulers. There's a ruler from the Austrians, one of their elites, and there is a member from Hungary from their ruling group called the Magyars. Now the dual monarchy is very concerned about the Balkans and their national independent movements. On the one hand, they're afraid that by setting an example that nationalist groups can divide and declare their independence from an empire, that certain groups within the Austro-Hungarian Empire will also start splitting off and splintering. And they don't want that to happen. So some people within the Austro-Hungarian Empire want to conquer the Balkans and incorporate that into their own land so that they don't have to worry about that problem anymore. Other members of the rulers in the dual monarchy, Austria-Hungary, want to conquer the Balkans so that the Magyars will have actually less power. So there are actually two different reasons why Austria-Hungary wants to conquer the Balkans. So that's how nationalism plays a role, at least in this section of Europe, in causing World War I. There's going to be this growing tension between Austria-Hungary and the Balkans region, and they're going to want to, the Balkans are going to constantly want to be declaring their independence from empires like the Ottoman Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And we'll talk about in a little bit how this is actually the region where World War I begins. But moving on to our second cause for the Great War is imperialism. Now, we should all know what imperialism is already. We've had a unit on it. And we know that there are some countries that are becoming very, very powerful and dominating large sections of the world through imperialism. The easiest example to point out is Great Britain. They have power in almost every single continent. There's that famous saying that the sun never sets on the British Empire. France is another country that has vast imperial holdings. So these two countries are already kind of established imperial powers. Other countries want to join the party, especially Germany, Russia, and Italy. So this creates tensions between these groups, between these countries, because there are some who already have strong imperial holdings, and there are others who want to take those imperial holdings for their own benefit. Now I'm just going to I'm going to give you a couple examples of what regions of the world created some of this tension. So first we're going to look at Africa. As you already all know, Africa was split among many of the European powers through the Berlin Conference. And down in South Africa, there was actually a bit of a split. There were some Dutch farmers, who are called the Boers, who had been living there for some time, but the British also had an imperial stake in South Africa. Now, towards the end of the 19th century, gold, diamonds, and other valuable minerals were discovered in South Africa, and this creates this sort of rush to get as many of the minerals as they could. Now, the Germans, they wanted to create a greater force amongst the Boers, because the Boers were kind of more related to the Germans than they were to the British. So this created the discovery of gold and gems here, created a lot of tension between Germany and Great Britain, and kind of drives a wedge between their diplomatic relationship. Moving now to the Middle East. Germany again is trying to expand their imperial holdings. They want to get access to the oil fields of the Middle East, and what they want to do is actually build a railroad from Berlin, the capital of Germany, all the way into Baghdad, which is the modern day capital of Iraq. Now, this would do three things for Germany. Number one, like I said, it would give them a link to the oil fields of the Middle East, which was increasingly becoming a source of power and fuel instead of coal for ships, for machinery, kind of all the stuff that you need to run an industrialized country. Number two, it would give them access to the Indian Ocean, which would open up these great new routes to trade for Germany. And number three, it would put them much, much closer to India, which was, of course, a British colony. So Great Britain saw this as a direct threat to one of their most important colonies, India. Again, driving kind of a wedge between Great Britain and Germany and any chance that they would have at friendship. The last region we're going to look at, again, it's part of Africa, and it's actually to the northwest. It's in Morocco. And you don't need to know too much in detail about this. There are these two crises called the First and Second Moroccan Crisis. Both times, both of these crises were attempts by Germany to take away the power of France in Morocco and to establish a German foothold within the colony. So it was an attempt by Germany to remove France as a colonial power and establish themselves. What they were hoping is that the Germans were hoping that by them stepping in there in Morocco, it would drive kind of this wedge between France and Great Britain, and it would make Great Britain friendlier with Germany. That's what they were hoping. What you need to know is that both of these attempts failed, and what it actually did, it made Great Britain and France much friendlier with one another, and it alienated Germany. And you can kind of see now that this is going to lead us to our third main cause of World War I, which is the system of alliances. So as we've already talked about real quick, Great Britain and France are becoming closer and closer friends, and as Germany is doing kind of these imperialist maneuvers, it's driving Great Britain further and further away from German friendship and making them much closer to France. So Great Britain and France, and also Russia a little later on, they sign these formal agreements that they are going to be friendly with one another. Now it's a French term, it's called an entente. So it doesn't mean that they're going to help each other if one of them gets attacked. It doesn't mean that they're going to, send troops if one country gets invaded. It's not a military alliance. It is basically just a document saying we are friendly with one another. So it's called an entente. Different than an alliance. Now, on the other hand, you have Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. They actually sign military alliances with one another. So it's those three kind of centralized, those three countries in the middle of Europe that are going to back each other up. Whereas you have Great Britain, France, and Russia kind of on the western and the eastern halves of Europe. They have an entente with one another. So these are going to be the two main alliance systems that are pitted against one another during the First World War. And finally, our last cause is militarism, which, if you could probably guess, is the buildup of each country's militaries. Now, the easiest example to point out is that there was a growing race between Great Britain and Germany over who would have the most powerful navy. Great Britain has, for now the past couple hundred years, been chiefly a maritime power. Now that just means that they have a strong navy. Now, to protect all of their imperial colonies, they always wanted to have a stronger navy than the next two most powerful countries in the world. And for a long time, they were quite capable of saying that they were more powerful than the next two strongest countries in the world. However, Germany and the United States were both rapidly creating a stronger navy. So it was making it much more difficult for Great Britain to do so, to maintain that 2-to-1 advantage. So this is just another tie-in to the fact that Great Britain and Germany have this increasing kind of wedge driven in between the two of them. And it's pushing Great Britain and France and Russia to kind of side with one another. That's not to say that it's Germany's fault. They felt like they needed a strong navy to protect themselves, but it's the clearest example of this growing arms race between these industrialized countries of Europe. And as we shall see in the future, through your notes and through future videos, we'll talk about how these four main causes, these four long-term causes, were set off by a specific event that occurred in the Balkans, and that will be the start of World War I. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in class. Thank you.